Cypress Bible Church, welcome back to question and answer videos. We are just addressing here a general biblical question. Having so many differences within all the denominations, including the number of books on biblical practices such as women pastors, etc., does this fall under Mark 9, chapter 38? Chapter 9, verse 38, when John said, "Teacher, we saw someone driving out demons in your name, and we tried to stop him because he was not following us. And Jesus said, 'Do not stop him, for whoever is not against us is for us.'" So first thing to do is to set that particular passage in its context. This is towards the end of Jesus' ministry. The Pharisees and the Sadducees are in hot pursuit of him in order to get him on a cross, and Jesus is trying to send out the message as quickly as he can, while he still has time left. So I think all that Jesus is actually saying in this passage is, listen, these guys aren't trying to kill us. Let's not waste our time with them. We've got to try to focus on staying alive, for heaven's sake. So I think that's what this passage is saying. It's not making some sort of comment about how we ought to relate to one another in terms of a modern 21st century, ecclesial, ecumenical, cross-denominational sort of thing. But the question is very legitimate, and we should try to answer it. How do we think about differences between denominations or differences even between one another? Some people have talked about this in terms of a theological triage or maybe even a target of convictions. So picture a target, if you will, and at the very center of this target is what we might call truths that we would die for, theology we would die for. And what's represented in that center is really things that we think are non-negotiable: the full deity of Jesus Christ, the atonement, the resurrection, justification by faith alone. I mean, these would be pieces of theology that we will not budge even a little bit. If it's not that, it's not Christian. The second level, if you go out one ring further in that target, would be things that maybe we wouldn't die for, but we would probably divide over, because they do represent a very significant difference in the way we practically live out our theology. So, for example, maybe our ecclesiology, how the church is structured, our method of baptism, that is very significant in terms of its application, the Lord's Supper, even things like gender roles within the church. It'd be hard to run a church if you had wildly different views on that. So these are things that, while we agree they're not central, they do make a significant difference in terms of how we operate, and we probably would make sense to just recognize we have enough differences here to divide. And then thirdly would just be things that are kind of, these aren't things that are central, they're not things we divide over, they're honestly just kind of things that they're just kind of interesting. We might just disagree on them. So we might think we could live in the same church, it'd be no problem. We could fellowship alongside one another. Things like our millennial view, maybe some differences on our gospel freedoms, how we view those things, certain eschatology questions, maybe even our interpretation of some difficult texts in the scriptures. These would all be things where we would say, okay, we're not going to divide, certainly not going to die over this, but we do just tend to disagree. And so I think that's the best way to kind of think about our differences, both one from another, but also across denominations.